Hi there, my crafty friends. I often get asked, why do I put layering and collaging underneath my art journal pages if I'm just going to cover them with paint and color? That is a very good question, and in this video I'm going to explain why I do it. I'm first going to create this art journal page that you see with all the collaging underneath, and then as the second part of this video I'm going to create a very similar one, sort of copying it as much as I can without using any of the collaging, so you yourself can see the difference. Now, I'm not saying that my way is the right way and without collaging is the wrong way. There's no right and wrong. I'm just explaining why I do it the way I do it and allowing you to see the difference. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I have lots of videos coming up. I'm working in my art journal page. It's a book that I got from the op shop for about $2, and what I do is I stick together 3 pages at a time so that the pages are thicker and easier to work with. And to avoid the book getting too thick with all the work, the art journal pages that I'm doing, I do tend to tear out every third or so page, which I then can use for other projects. For the collaging pieces for this page, I'm using greens and neutral tones. I've got some craft paper that is green with little white dots. On the right, you can see I have one that's got some punched out pieces. I use that to punch out little shapes for something else, and I do like to use the shapes because it brings additional texture to the piece. I've also added some vintage sheet music, another piece of textured cardstock on the bottom left, and now I'm just have some text, and I like to glue it either upside down or even sideways, just to give it a little bit of interest and something different. I also have these numbers that are from an old calendar that I'm attaching. I'm using a glue stick for this. You could also use gel medium or craft glue, whatever you have handy. I've also added some grid paper that is just from an exercise book from one of my kids' old books, just the little blue squares that you can see, and I'm adding a few more numbers. I like the size of them and that they're black and bold. That is the collage piece of this art journal page. I'm not going to add any more. I'm now adding a layer of clear gesso, which will help waterproof it so that the color doesn't run through to all the pages. While the clear gesso is still wet, I'm adding white gesso. I'm not adding it everywhere, and I'm doing some darker areas and some lighter areas. I find using the gesso connects everything and makes it more cohesive, and tones down some of the brighter colors, makes them more muted. I'm going to use my watercolors to add color to this page. I'm going to start with a brownie color to make it look a bit like a coffee stain or a vintage kind of color. I'm adding it quite watery, and then I'm using my water spray bottle just to help the color run. I'm just letting it run wherever it wants to go, and because of the underlying collaging that I've done, and you'll see the difference once you see page 2 that I do, it makes some areas go light, some dark, it runs faster over some, it absorbs in others. It really gives it quite a variety of what the color does depending on the underlying paper. This would be one of the reasons why I use collaging in my art journals. The fact that the paint or whatever color medium you're using reacts differently to the different textures of the collage paper you use, which adds dimension to your artwork and makes it not flat. Although I leave the color to run wherever it wants to go, I do tend to dab the center with a tissue, only because the water tends to well there, and if we leave too much water, it's going to get really soggy and then it takes really long to dry, and the pages could pull apart and actually wreck the spine. I'm going to add now my next color. It's an olive green and it's a metallic one from this palette. It's quite light, but I do like that it's muted and it just gives it a bit of a wash over the areas that I'm doing it. I've used watercolors and a light color palette for this project only to try and emphasize the collaging that I'm trying to talk about in this video. So sometimes I do use acrylics, which are thicker, more opaque, and they don't allow so much to show through. But for the purpose of this video, and because sometimes I do like just to use watercolors and have a soft, like a soft art journal page, not always bright and hard thick colors, we're going with more soft watercolors. You could also use acrylics, just really watered down if you don't have watercolors. I'm loving a little bit of blue. I'm adding just a splash of blue. Again, very, very watery. And now some pink for a bright pop of color. I do love this method of just applying the color and then putting water and letting it run. I love it that it's unpredictable. You don't know where the color is going to go, what shapes or patterns it's going to make. And I do find it quite magical actually, because you can't plan it. You just let it run and then you see the beautiful patterns that emerge, some blend, some overlap. It's really lovely. Now I'm adding some pink splatter. I always love me a bit of splatter. And I'm adding some splatter with the brown, which is a bit of a mistake because I don't like it. The color doesn't look good in a splatter. It looks just like mud has fallen there. So I'm just going to dab it off the wet bits and then put some water just to wash it out and blend it into the background. The magic of art journaling. There's no things as mistakes. You can just make changes. I'm now going to add some embellishments to my page, and I've got the word Wanderlust that is actually from a Kaiser Craft 12-inch by 12-inch scrapbook paper, and also the words Adventure, Explore, Journey and Dreamer. And I'm adding a piece of vellum just underneath. This will add additional texture, and I've used the sewing machine just to sew and attach the vellum to the word. Just one straight stitch, and I've left the strings quite long. I do quite like that, and I've done the same with the 4 words, just on a piece of vellum. I have this beautiful marbled metallic paper that I'm going to use the pink of for the background behind my wording on the bottom left. I tried the blue purpley color for Wanderlust, but that eventually I didn't like, so I took it away. But I am using some of the green. Now this green, if you remember, I used in my collage section as well, which has now become muted and painted over. So I'm using the bright version for a little bit more pop of color and to connect the foreground and the background. Once I'm finished moving everything around and I'm happy with the composition, I'm going to glue everything down with a glue stick. The sewing machine stitching isn't holding these words too well on the vellum, so I'm just adding a drop of glue just to secure them. Vellum is a little fussy to stick down sometimes. When you use a glue stick, it still tends to curl up a little bit. So I'm using some craft glue to secure it. I found the craft glue glues the vellum a little better. And while I have the craft glue out, I'm also gluing down the little strings from my stitching, just randomly in squiggles over the rest of the pages. For some additional contrast, I'm framing the word wanderlust with a black watercolor pencil. I'm just dipping the point into some water so it has some thicker blobby areas and some thinner ones, and I'm just going roughly around the wording, not very neatly, just roughly. And then I'm going down with some squiggles, just moving my hand around and making some squigglies down in different directions and up to balance it on the left and then on the far left page too. Above the word wanderlust, I find that the squiggles not to my liking, so I just use a little bit of water on a paintbrush to soften them up a little bit. Now, let's take a closer look at the collaging and why I do it. Look at the 26 that is popping out underneath. It's very faint, but it's something of interest that's come through, and how the color blends. You can see the music paper peeping out. The corner of the music paper has got a different color to the edge of the book because of the different paper. So it's made a different contrast there too. You can see the grid paper peeping through, and then underneath there's some more music paper you can see. It's all just magic that's happening. And then here where my little circles are, you can actually see, because they're cut out, the text from the original book is underneath there too. And the color blue has got a different hue inside the circle to outside the circle. The color blue is brighter on the background paper as opposed to where the green was. You can see my sideways text. They're also making some interest, and how it blends into the original background. I love this. I love the different magic that appears from underneath. This is why I do the collaging. You don't have to do this if you don't like it, or if you don't like these additional textures, but I really do. You can see the edging there also has created different tones. It looks like a line. Sometimes the edges go a little bit darker into the music paper there, and then this greeny color that I've got is like a texture. There is some of the grey on the plain background. The pink, the 5 is barely pointing through, but the little square has made some focal point, or just a point of interest. And then the beautiful green that I have, that's a textured paper, has also made its own designs. You can see the numbers, they're also peeping through, my number 6 and my number 7. Oh, I did add some black splatter too, which I didn't actually put as part of this video, but you can see I did a bit of black splatter as well. And you can just see how interesting this page is, and how much there is to look at, and how the colors change depending on where they landed. I'm not going to create the same page, but I'm not going to use any collaging, so you can see the difference. I'm using a watercolor paper as a base, and then these two pages I've actually torn out of my art journal, so it's the same kind of paper, and I'm just gluing those down to make it look like an open book. I didn't do it in the art journal book because I think it's easier to compare when you have separate pieces, and I'm just going to trim it. It's going to be slightly smaller, but not by much. And I'm keeping this open as my reference. The only additional thing I'm going to do is, before I add the color, is add a layer of the clear gesso. This is just to waterproof it so it doesn't become too soggy with all the water that I'm using. So just a quick run of some clear gesso. Once the clear gesso is dry, I'm going to start the color, and I'm doing it the same. I'm using the same colors and the same method, just splotching the paint on and then letting it run wherever it wants to go. Already you can see that where the color runs, it's all running the same. So all the brown that I've done looks exactly the same. There's no difference in the direction is different or the pattern it's made, but the look is the same. And now the metallic olive green. I'm not sure if it's my imagination, but it seems that without the collaging in the background, the color here seems to run faster. It goes more straight down. It doesn't have anywhere to really any grooves or any different texture to run over. So it seems to run a little faster, which makes more or longer running lines. Just an observation. I could be wrong. And now that beautiful blue, just in the 3 areas, same as the original. And my splash of pink. So technically, this page is done the same way as the first page. I've done the same colors in the same areas and with the same technique. I'm now going to add the embellishments, exactly the same as the first page. I'm also using the same pink cardstock and the same green cardstock to go underneath the lettering. As the process is the same, I'm not going to show it all. I've glued it down with a glue stick, and I'm going to do the detail with a black pencil. Now, let's compare the two. And please do tell me in the comments below which one you prefer. I personally love the one on the left. The colors are different and there's just so much more interest in it. The other one is more flat to me. It just looks like color that has spilt onto the page, and I don't find it very interesting for me. Like I said, it's not right or wrong. This doesn't mean it's the wrong way if this is the way you do it. This is just, I prefer doing it with my texturing. And then I did realize that I forgot to do some splattering when I was comparing the two, so I'm quickly just going to do some pink and black splatter, because you always need a bit of splatter in art journaling. Please do let me know what you think or what you currently do. Do you prefer the plainer version or the one with all the collaging? And if you haven't done the collaging before, are you going to give it a go? So similar, yet so different. I absolutely love my collaging, and it's also a great way to use up scrap bits of paper. My crafty friends, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I do hope it answered some of your questions regarding collaging and art journaling, and maybe it's inspired you to create something new. Please subscribe to my channel. I have lots of new videos coming up soon, and do hit the little bell button so you can get notified when I upload the new content. See you soon. Bye.